Bernie's been joined by a chorus of candidates and newly elected officials who have papered over the failed policies of socialism with bumper sticker slogans and slick social media campaigns. What they're actually offering is just more of the same. More taxes, more spending, more government, and less freedom. It was freedom, not socialism, that gave us the most prosperous economy in the history of the world. It was freedom, not socialism, that ended slavery, won 2 world wars, and stands today as the beacon of hope for all the world. It was freedom, not socialism, that's moving us beyond the prejudices of the past to create a more perfect union and extend the blessings of liberty to every American, regardless of race or creed or color. It was freedom. And it was freedom, not socialism, that gave us the highest quality of life, the cleanest environment on earth, and improved the health and well-being of millions around the world. It was freedom. What Medicare for all really means is quality health care for none. The only thing green about the so-called Green New Deal is how much green it's going to cost taxpayers if these people ever pass it into law. Venezuela was once one of the richest and most vibrant democracies in the Western Hemisphere, but under Maduro's socialist rule, it's become one of the poorest and most despotic. But sadly, in recent weeks, that's exactly what some Democrats have done in the national debate. Last month, a leading Democrat in Congress actually compared our U.S. Customs and Border Protection detention facilities to concentration camps. Her allies in Congress, the left, and in the media shamefully came to her defense. As recently as yesterday morning, one of her allies in Congress was asked if they agreed with comparing the noble and compassionate work done by U.S. Customs and Border personnel at detention facilities to the concentration camps of Nazi Germany, and she answered absolutely. To compare the humane work of the dedicated men and women of Customs and Border Protection with the horrors of the Holocaust is an outrage. The Nazis took lives. American law enforcement save lives every day. And make no mistake about it, this slander of law enforcement was an insult to the 6 million killed in the Holocaust. And it should be condemned by every American of every political party everywhere. I promise you, President Donald Trump and I will always honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust, and we will always honor the service of the brave men and women of law enforcement all across this country. The truth is, as I stand before you today, we have a crisis at our southern border. We're actually on track this year to see nearly 1 million people come across our southern border to take advantage of well-advertised loopholes in America's asylum laws. And for the first time in history, I've seen it firsthand. The majority of those coming across our southern border are families with vulnerable children who are being enticed by human traffickers and drug cartels to pay cash to make the long and dangerous journey north. And it's a dangerous journey, fraught often with unspeakable violence and abuse. 70% of illegal immigrants, once they present at the border, report being victims of violence along the way. According to Doctors Without Borders, nearly 1/3 of young women traveling to our southern border from Central America are sexually assaulted on the journey. Our Customs and Border Protection and Health and Human Services personnel do compassionate work to care for those who have made the dangerous journey and suffered for it. And they provide that compassionate support every day. Unaccompanied children who cross our border are provided with food, education, health care, and transportation to their destination city, all at taxpayer expense. Health and Human Services works to place these children with family members in the United States or alternative arrangements like foster care. Family units who are kept in ICE custody are sent to family residential centers where they can receive shelter and care. Make no mistake about it, the facilities on our border are overcrowded because they're overwhelmed. For the last 6 months, Democrats denied there was even a crisis at our border. They called it a manufactured crisis. Remember that? In so doing, they denied additional funding to care for the vulnerable families flowing across our southern border. And as I stand here today, they continue to refuse to close the loopholes used by human traffickers to exploit those vulnerable families. But in the face of this Democrat obstruction in Congress, President Trump has stood strong. He demanded that Mexico step up, and now Mexico is doing more than ever before to secure their southern border and ours. And just last week, President Trump signed into law a bipartisan measure providing $4.6 billion in humanitarian aid to support the work of HHS and Customs and Border Protection. But you all deserve to know, the same members of Congress who had the gall to compare our detention facilities to concentration camps voted against providing additional humanitarian aid to the same facilities they denounced. In the face of that type of Democrat obstruction, I'll make you a promise. Under this president's leadership, we will secure our border. We will provide compassionate relief to vulnerable families swept up in the crisis, and we will fix this broken immigration system once and for all. So, men and women of Christians United for Israel, we've reached a decisive moment in history. And support for Israel and the Jewish people, I believe, is more important than ever before. All over the world, anti-Semitism is on the rise. You see it on college campuses, in the marketplace, and sadly, even in the halls of Congress. You know, there was a time that support for Israel was not a partisan issue here in Washington. I'll never forget the day in 2007 that I, a conservative Christian Republican, was asked to co-found the Congressional Anti-Semitism Task Force with the only Holocaust survivor ever to serve in Congress, the late and great Congressman Tom Lantos. We formed that task force because of the broad consensus that existed in the Congress of support for Israel, support for the Jewish people, but how things have changed. It's astonishing to think that the party of Harry Truman, which did so much to help create the state of Israel, has been co-opted by people who promote rank anti-Semitic rhetoric and work to undermine the broad American consensus of support for Israel. Recently, a freshman Democrat in Congress trafficked in repeated anti-Semitic tropes. We all remember them. She alleged that congressional support for Israel reflected an allegiance to a foreign country. She said that Israel had, and I quote, hypnotized the world. Well, let me say this from the heart. Anti-Semitism has no place in the Congress of the United States of America or anywhere in this nation. And anyone who slanders the historic alliance between the United States and Israel should not be sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives. Maybe most astonishing of all, as we talk about how times have changed, the party that has been home to so many American Jews for so long recently couldn't even muster the votes to unequivocally condemn anti-Semitism in a resolution. I mean, that's why the work of Christians United for Israel is more important than ever before. Unfortunately, CUFI is also bigger and more effective than ever before. You know, I remember when Christians United for Israel was a group of a few hundred Bible-believing Christians. Last time I spoke to you, this organization had grown to more than 3 million believers. And on my way over, I was just told Christians United for Israel now has more than 6 million members all across America. You know, Karen and I have, she said 7 million. I got it. It's a movement that spans this nation, and it's a movement for such a time as this. You know, Karen and I have always treasured our relationships with Christians United for Israel. In fact, we worked hand in hand with this organization back when I was governor of the state of Indiana. With your strong support, I was proud to sign the toughest anti-BDS legislation of any state in America. And I thank you for your support. But you deserve to know, remarkably, today all but one Democrat running for president voted against the Combating BDS Act in the United States Senate. So let me make this one more point. Anyone who aspires to the highest office in the land should not be afraid to stand with Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel and the United States will always stand together because America and Israel are more than friends. We're more than allies. The United States and Israel are family. Descended from a common tradition of faith, we're a family that upholds common values, and together we share a common destiny. You know, at the President's State of the Union speech this year, that bond came into high relief in the faces of two extraordinary men that the President introduced to the nation. One was a Jewish-American hero, Sergeant Herman Zychik, a veteran of D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge, a truly great American of the greatest generation. You know, last month we marked the 75th anniversary of D-Day. and we will never fail to honor the heroism of those who served in the greatest generation. But if you remember, sitting beside Sergeant Zaitchik was Joshua Kaufman, a survivor of Dachau, a real concentration camp that Sergeant Zaitchik helped liberate nearly a year after D-Day. These two men, more than 7 decades later, were reunited that night. United not just in their stories, but in our history and in our cause for freedom and justice. 75 years later, without a dry eye in the House, they stood together in the Congress of the United States. And in that relationship, a soldier and a survivor was a poignant reminder of the unbreakable bond between America and Israel. The bond that brings you all here today. But it was ultimately a bond of faith. I'm told before they left the Capitol that the Zaitchik family and the Kaufman family met for the first time. And Herman had his Bible with him. A Bible that he had when he was in service in the Army. They opened it together. And they sang praise to a faithful God. And renewed the ties that bind our great people. That bond endured the horrors of war. It's endured through the decades. And it always will. So why Israel? We stand with Israel today for the same reason that Americans have always stood with Israel. We stand with Israel because her cause is our cause. Her values are our values. And her fight is our fight. We stand with Israel because we believe in right over wrong, in good over evil, in liberty over tyranny. And we stand with Israel because we cherish that ancient promise that Americans have always cherished throughout our history, that those who bless her will be blessed. Today and every day, the Jewish state of Israel and all the Jewish people bear witness to God's faithfulness, as well as their own. The American people have always marveled. Through nearly 1,900 years of exile, the longest exile of any people in history, the Jewish people drew strength from the promises of God through pogroms, persecutions, and expulsions in the ghettos, and finally, even in the death camps. The Jewish people clung to God's eternal promise. And they remembered that even if you've been banished to the most distant land under the heavens, from there he would gather them and bring them back to the land which their fathers possessed. And so he did. And America was there. America was standing with the people of Israel every step of the way. Amazing to think, even in those darkest of times, he heard from heaven, his holy dwelling place, and they had faith. So it's on that basis I close today. And I know you've got a full program ahead of you. You'll be hearing from other friends of Israel throughout this administration and throughout the country. And let me just say before I close, on behalf of my wife Karen and our little family, thank you for the honor of serving as your vice president. It is the greatest honor of my life.